All right, welcome to today's Community Reinvestment Agency board meeting. For those of you tuning in, the RDA has been officially renamed to the Community Reinvestment Agency, CRA. So today is January 21st, 2025. Our meetings are public and you're welcome to join us in person, on Zoom, or by watching from the City Council's agenda page, YouTube, SLC TV. We hope you'll continue to join us in whichever manner you feel most comfortable. As we begin our comments to the board, we'll remind you that written comments may also be submitted to the CRA offices via P.O. Box 145476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114-5476, or emailing council.comments@slc.gov, or calling the 24-hour phone line 801-535-7654. We will start the meeting with general comments to the board. That's the opportunity for anyone in the public to speak to us about anything in front of the CRA board or the CRAs in general. The same rules of decorum that apply for our council meetings apply here. And if you need to speak with staff, please select Scott from the list of participants, Scott Corpany, who is moderating the Zoom, and Isaac Canedo will be calling out the names of those who wish to comment based on the order we receive their names. So if you're on Zoom, when Isaac calls your name, you may unmute. So let's go ahead with our first comment.
There is nobody registered to speak today, Mr. Chair.
All right, thanks, Itzhak. Is there anyone in the audience in person that would like to speak? All right, so that was, so we're moving on to section B, which is public hearings. There are no specific scheduled public hearings, so that takes us to section C, Community Reinvestment Agency business. Item number 1 is election of a chair and vice chair for the calendar year 2025.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Board Member Dugan.
I would like to nominate Board Member Mono as our chair for this year.
Thank you. And we straw poll, or we discuss? Okay.
Oh, you can discuss.
All right. Are there any other nominations for chair for the year? Thank you, Board Member Dugan, for nominating me. I'm excited to hopefully fill that role and use this year to help push forward. I'm giving a speech. It's just not good. Use this year to move forward some of our policies as a city and as a CRA and the board, and again, and obviously for the community. So thank you. So write your name in the top and then who you will be voting for. All right, Cindy Lou, our acting city recorder.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the written ballots have confirmed that it's a unanimous support for you to serve as chair.
Thank you, board members. Are there any nominations for vice chair? Board member Young.
Thank you. I would like to nominate council committee member, I always get that wrong, Dan Dugan for vice chair.
Any other nominations? Board member Dugan, do you want to say anything?
Thank you for the nomination, and also I look forward to working with Board Member Mono and on the items we discussed over at the on the retreat, and also on the communication side of the house, but also on the development of the city and affordable living for across the board and our priorities there. So thank you.
Great. Same as before, write your name on the top and who you're voting for vice chair. Check the box.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Board
Cindy
Chair
Lou.
and Mr. Board Vice Chair. We do have a unanimous vote for the approval of Board Member Dugan to serve as Vice Chair.
Thank you, Cindy Lou. Congratulations, board member Dugan. All right, that takes us to item C2, which is approval of the minutes. We're looking for approval of meeting minutes of November 12th and December 10th, 2024.
Second.
A motion from board member Wharton and second from board member Dugan. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That passes unanimously. Okay, item C3 is an informational update on the Commercial Development Loan Program Policy. Kara Lindsley, CRA Deputy Director, Christina Harold, a Project Manager, Ashley Ogden, Senior Project Manager, are going to be presenting that. Anyone else I missed? Doesn't look like it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Is this close enough? Is that better? Okay. My name is Christina Harold. I'm a project manager. I'm joined by Ashley and Kara, as was said earlier. We are here to talk about a continuation of an item that we discussed last August regarding the CRA's efforts to create a package of commercial assistance programs, which would complement the robust set of affordable housing programs that we already have. And this is with a goal to better address the real estate and financial needs of the city's local businesses and nonprofits. So today we are seeking feedback on an updated loan program, which is one of the tools that would be used to support both the creation and adaptive reuse of commercial and mixed-use developments. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this slide shows the entire set of commercial assistance programs that were presented to you back in August, and they include revising the CRA loan program to prioritize the funding of commercial projects that support the CRA's mission and values. We also propose to expand the Granary District Adaptive Reuse Program by making it available to all CRA project areas. We've also discussed creating a new grant program that would provide funding to local organizations to develop, protect, or preserve community and cultural facilities. And lastly, we would like to create a commercial acquisition and leasing strategy where the CRA would take more of a landlord role, leasing to local businesses and nonprofits. Next slide, please. So as we dug into it, we began to realize that there's an opportunity to make the programs for the commercial loan program more efficient by consolidating the loan and the adaptive reuse program. So today we'll be just focusing on the proposed policy for commercial loan program. Our official proposal is to repeal both the existing loan program and the Granary District Adaptive Reuse policies and replace them with the new Commercial Development Loan Program policy, which we will refer to as CDLP. Next slide, please.
Can I ask a quick question? Mm-hmm. So, when do we have it scheduled when we're planning to talk about the other two programs, or is there any updates that are? When can we expect to talk more about that?
Yeah, so we're working on the what we're calling the acquisition and leasing strategy. That'll be coming to you next, and we're hoping to get that in front of you before budget season. The grant program is kind of our last priority. Probably won't get to you before budget season, but hoping to have some new staff work on that soon.
Okay, great. I'd love to if there's any like early small group opportunity to just get an update on that. I'd love that. But
sure, yeah,
thank you for that.
Thanks. So the CDLP is structured similarly to the CRA's HDLP, or the Housing Development Loan Program, but it will have a focus on the commercial and mixed-use developments. So this is just a list of the policy intents statements, which are included in the draft policy, but the priorities include creating new commercial spaces and unique business districts, encouraging attainable rental and ownership opportunities, providing opportunities for new services, amenities, or underrepresented business types, investing in mixed-use projects with residential components, supporting the preservation, rehabilitation, or adaptive reuse, encouraging green building, maximizing CRA's impacts, and promoting a balanced economy with quality jobs, and then also expanding the program to non-traditional applicants. Next slide, please. So this slide highlights the key changes that we're proposing to make from the existing loan program. And this is a really high-level overview, and we can go into each of these in more detail if you would like, but our plan is just to kind of run through these right now and then talk about them more in detail later if you'd like. So for threshold requirements first, we were proposing to make the program a little bit more stringent with threshold requirements, where in addition to meeting project area objectives, we would also like projects to break ground within 12 to 15 months, and they must also meet 2 qualified livability benchmarks. For eligible project types and costs, the current program allows for affordable housing as an eligible project type, but we are proposing to refine the program a little bit more for more strictly commercial and mixed-use projects. And in the current program, eligible project costs are construction hard costs. We'd like to keep this the same, and we would also like to consider acquisition, infrastructure, remediation, demolition as eligible project costs if it's part of a larger development project on a case-by-case basis.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
on the qualified livable benchmarks, we have those now. Are we adopting those things with a weighted level when we go back to your intent and you're encouraging, the opportunities of new services amendments, childcare, after-school programs, grocery stores? Are they weighted at different levels, those type of businesses, or they all everyone gets the same
That's a good
level?
question.
Yeah, so we were planning on treating those the same way the HDLP does. So there'll be administrative guidelines where the qualifying livability benchmark criteria is laid out, but also, which Christine will get to in a little bit, livability benchmarks that can get you interest rate reductions as well. And we actually are thinking about weighting them because not every benchmark is equal, I would say. I think some are bigger asks than others. But we have not fully fleshed that out yet, but it would be in the administrative guidelines document, and we didn't really flesh that out in this policy to provide some flexibility.
Okay, I appreciate it, because I like to focus on the livable, the affordable living, which is childcare's, food sources, things that people need, not a gym. I mean, we like to have that gym for stress release, but I'd rather have some daycare and some grocery stores, those type of amenities or after-school programs in the development. So I'd like to have more discussions on how you weigh those different businesses. Thank you.
Yeah. And just to speak to that a little bit, so the policy does name the benchmarks, and the benchmarks, I think, are an attachment to the memo, but it does outline the benchmarks that would be threshold requirements. So an applicant would have to meet 2 of them. And yeah, a baseline requirement, because this is a commercial loan program, it'd have to be true mixed use, true commercial, but also childcare facilities or after school programs would be specifically named in that criteria as something that could meet that.
That's a great point. Okay. So,
Sorry,
Yes, yeah, sure.
Board Member Pui has his hand raised.
Oh, thank you. I agree with Board Member Dugan about the priorities that we share. I also want to make sure that we are not constraining too much ourselves, because one of the most amazing things about this tool, as we saw it in other cities, and this is why we've been pushing and share this idea together with the CRA, is that we are creating economic development, and it could take a form of a gym, or it could take form of a coffee shop, and we are creating a more perfect economic tool and a strategy for some parts of our city that are not having those things are not just happening. But I agree that we share those priorities, but I don't want to narrow it too much that this tool is only for those things. We saw it in other cities we toured, that some ice cream shops and local businesses that couldn't otherwise afford this type of rents were able to start a business and take off from there. So I see it both ways, but I think there is a medium, there is a balance that we can find.
And I think this is a question for staff, but I think the benchmarks, I'm looking at the list and the attachment, none of them have anything to do with what the business is. They're what the project is, right? Like what happens with the construction project. So any kind of project any kind of business could qualify. Does it increase public art or have higher quality design? Am I reading that right? Or
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. We could, if we wanted to dig into this more, slide 12, I think, actually has, or slide 11 and 12 would be good to check out. So I don't know if we could, yeah, thank you. So this kind of highlights the differences between the existing RDA or CRA loan program and then the proposed program. So it would have to be commercial or mixed use in a project area, prepared to break ground in a timely manner, meet a minimum of 2 qualifying benchmarks, and then we list what those are. And then, so the intent of those benchmarks are in the attachment, but we'd actually define criteria in the guidelines. And so, for example, commercial vitality, the commercial spaces benchmark, we would be looking for local and independent businesses or a community-serving nonprofit, or I think we say a business that provides an underrepresented business type or service type in the neighborhood. So we don't name like industries or anything like that, but we are, and that's something we wanted to discuss today. We had a policy question about how to define local and independent business, or what kind of preferences we should have. But right now, that is what we're proposing, is to have those kind of preferences.
All right, sorry to sidetrack you.
It's okay. I mean, should we good? Yeah.
So could we go back to slide 5, please?
Okay. So, so the next change that we are proposing, the current program only allows us to lend to property owners. And we found, though, that oftentimes the tenants are the driving force for some of the renovations. We'd like to expand eligibility for to include tenants and ground lessees in addition to property owners, as long as the tenants or ground lessees have property owners' approval. And while this change would increase the risk on our loans, it would allow for more diverse applicant and project types.
I'm very supportive of that. I don't know about other board members, but I definitely think commercial construction is more often driven by the tenant than the landowner.
So the next section there, the loan amount, the current program does not have a cap on a loan amount, but we are proposing to have a maximum of $2 million, which would allow the CRA to maximize our impact and also the use of our limited resources. And the interest rate, so the current interest, the standard interest rate is the Treasury yield curve plus 3%, which we are proposing to keep that starting point the same, but we would want to modify the opportunities for rate reduction, sort of like Ashley was mentioning. In the current program, applicants can reduce their interest rates by meeting certain public benefit criteria, and they can get the interest rate down to as low as the Treasury rate, which in recent years has been very low. So we would like to expand the interest rate reduction options using the livability benchmarks like we were talking about as the reduction criteria, but then setting the interest rate floor at 3%. The adaptive reuse incentive, this is sort of where we're talking about integrating the adaptive reuse incentive into the loan program. Currently, it's limited to the Granary District, but we would like to, with this program modification, open it up to all applicants, allowing any project that reuses vacant, underutilized, or economically challenged buildings would be eligible for up to $200,000 of loan forgiveness. And the $200,000 could be the entirety of the project costs, or it could be part of a larger development budget.
I had some thoughts and questions on that, but do you want to, we can take those now or go after, but. Yeah,
I say
go
let's
ahead.
ask now. I wanted to know if that seems like an appropriate amount. I just what we've seen in terms of upfront needed principal costs to cover some of these projects. I just what stood out to me is that may be a very minimal amount, and we may need to consider. Obviously, there's been work, but I'd love to know the formula as to how you acquired the $200,000 number.
Sure. So that's the Granary District Adaptive Reuse Program has been in existence for, I don't know, like 8 years now, I think, and has been pretty successful. But that number was from that program. So we offered forgivable loans up to $200,000. So we kind of left that dollar amount the same. I will say, I think with adaptive reuse, $200,000 is probably just a drop in the bucket. But we've also met with developers in the past and asked them what they thought about that incentive, and they loved it, and were basically like, I mean, of course, anything they could get forgiven to go towards their project, they're very appreciative of. But that number is the same number we've been, I guess, working with in the granary program.
And I guess I have a question about expanding it. I think it's a good idea to expand to other project areas, but in the granary, there was a specific and acute, like a lot of building stock that we wanted to be reused, that we were afraid it wouldn't be reused or that needed additional seismic remediation because they were warehouses and couldn't be reused. Now, let's say it goes to the State Street project area and there's a existing retail space on State Street, and a new tenant comes in and wants to do a restaurant in there, and we decide it meets all of the goals of the project area, but the building already has a grease trap and is already kind of designed for that. Would that then, like, I'm not seeing as big of a financial problem of opening that restaurant in a place where the buildings, does that make sense? Like, we don't have a specific acute, like tons of vacant buildings in every part of our city like we did in the granary. So does it have to be older than a certain number of years or eligible for historic something? What's the
Either of us could
threshold?
answer this. I think that's a great point. It's something worth highlighting, I think, to discuss, because we really are, the way this is written right now is really just any adaptive reuse and reuse of existing building stock is good, and that's how it's kind of written. So it is pretty flexible and open. And that would be the goal. This language here on this slide is also taken from the existing program, and we basically say vacant, underutilized, or economically challenged building. So basically, if you're rehabbing it to a use that like improves the community, enhances the neighborhood, we would count that, but it is very wide open right now.
Because it seems like it could be a space that is vacant or existing building stock, but is really in fine condition and ready to be moved into. And then just because it's not a new building, we would be then subsidizing up to if it's a small tenant improvement, it could be the whole project. So I would want to think through that. I agree with Board Member Lopez Chavez about the 200,000 maybe not being enough as well. But I'm also thinking, and I know we didn't, again, I guess I'm open to being convinced otherwise, but it seems like the granary was such a unique place that the program that worked there might not be appropriate everywhere else. And I'm thinking, like, do we want to implement something similar to, like, it's not 100% of the construction cost, but it's like the federal tax credits for adaptive reuse are 20% of the project. So maybe we say it's 20% up to 400,000 or something, so that we're not paying for the whole construction of something. But if it's a bigger project, they could get more of a subsidy from us. All just questions. Board Member Lopez Chavez.
Yeah, thank you. Can you remind me of the boundaries for which this loan could be applicable all over the city? Could you please remind me of that?
Yeah, it's in any CRA project area.
Right. So I'm just wondering, in terms of that, I mean, I think this is a conversation I want to be had. I do think granary is very unique, and I see other places where this is applicable, and I think that we could consider a different amount. I'd love to have that conversation.
Okay. Board Member.
Yeah, I like your idea about having a ceiling, but also make it a percentage, because right now it's $200,000, whether the construction project takes $10 million or $250,000. So I think the idea of having a ceiling, but also a percentage of that construction cost, whether it's 20% or some percentage of that, I think that's a good way to go to allow that to move with the need. Yeah, I think I kind of like to look at that also.
Okay.
So,
Any other things that we should be considering on that from staff related
I
to
think
that?
the only thing that I would point out, and we do have a budget slide coming up, but if there were many loans or we were forgiving a lot of money, I think our loan fund would diminish pretty quickly. That's the only thing I would say.
Appreciate that. And that's where I think we need to limit it to buildings that are old enough or of some historic character where we want them to be preserved, and the preservation would be financially difficult for those projects. Which I think we kind of all, as a city and community, agreed that Granary, we wanted those buildings, at least some of them preserved, and that we wanted to help with that. So for that same reason of, we want to help with this, but we don't want it to just be a way that the whole fund gets drained, is where I would say let's figure out when it's applicable. Board Member Petro.
I'm not sure exactly where this fits, but one of my perennial issues with commercial spaces is that they're built with not a lot of, with no businesses in mind. And so particularly in districts 1 and 2, we see a lot of compliance with TSA zoning where the ground floor commercial stays unused. I wouldn't hate if at somewhere in the application process or in somewhere in the incentives, there was some sort of waiting for a weighted measure, not waiting as in to esperar, a wait that would reflect collaboration. If a developer were already talking to a grocery chain and found out what their dimensions were and know that they have someone who will be using this, I would really like to promote as much proactivity in the usage of these spaces, especially in neighborhoods like mine. It's just the next broken window that potentially could restart the broken window cycle. And so I don't know exactly where I want it to fit, but I could see it fitting in these kinds of incentives. I could see it fitting in the qualification process. But as I've been listening, I would like to promote proactivity.
That's interesting. And I think I don't know if it falls in this program or a different one, but encouraging developers, specifically of mixed use projects where the commercial space isn't really helping the developer, but they're doing it because it's what we're asking and what we want and what's good for the community, but encouraging them to actually have in mind what the tenant is going to be while they're developing the project, not just list it. Is there an interest rate reduction if somebody files a tenant improvement building permit within 3 months of the building getting a CFO or something like that?
Right. That's why I want it to be a carrot. I don't think people should be penalized, especially since it's a new behavior we're asking out of developers. But I hear that we can't spend any money right now because interest rates are absolutely crippling. And so if that's the case, maybe there is a carrot we can offer to try to train in a new behavior. And
I'd love staff's input on whether that would be here, whether that would be in the housing NOFA, or where that might fit, but and maybe it's both. I think Board Member Pui has his hand up.
Oh yeah, thank you. It was my understanding that this tool was maybe to be used in situations where we had these open spaces in the bottom of buildings, but they were not done whatsoever because they needed to know who the tenant was. But on the flip side of that, the tenant probably didn't have the capacity to sign a 5-year contract to make those tenant improvements, and putting a kitchen that is very expensive. That this could be potentially part of that, but maybe this is a little far away from the objective of this tool. So I'm very curious how all of that fits, and I agree that it may or may not. I would love to hear from staff.
Yeah, I think this is a tool. I mean, the loan terms are really favorable, so I think that in itself is an incentive, but then we are asking for certain things like the tenant to be a local business or a childcare facility or whatever's in the livability benchmarks. But we have thought about this a little bit. we thought about having more of a, not a carrot, but a stick, I guess, like saying you also have to have these spaces leased by within X months of getting a C of O. But then we weren't sure if that's unreasonable because that's really up to like market conditions and demand. So we have thought about that, and maybe there's a way to trigger the incentive. Once the space is leased, you get the incentive. Yeah.
I think this is going into a different program than the one we're talking about today, but I think when the RDA or the CRA is investing heavily in a project, even if it's a housing project, we have more of an opportunity to that, and especially if it's land that we own and are disposing of, we have an opportunity to do that. And so I think it's probably a different tool at different levels, but I think what Board Member Petro and Puy are bringing up is important. So I would love some creative thought on that. Should we keep going?
Yeah, we can keep going. The last part of this slide. So for consideration, recently there was a request for all the loans to go through the board, but with this program update, we are proposing to reinstate the provision that allows for finance committee approval of loans that are less than or equal to $500,000 for a speedier approval process. Next slide, please. So we want to quickly note that with our proposed changes to this program, they are designed to complement the tools that the Department of Economic Development and Community and Neighborhoods is offering the community. We've been working in collaboration with them over the last few months, and what we found really is that their programs are tailored for shorter term, smaller budget projects. And the CDLP is really aimed more at providing construction loans for larger development projects and improvements that really stay with the property. And then also each of these other programs has different geographies. With the EDLF is available citywide, and the facade grant program is available within established target areas. And the CRA programs will be available in project areas. Next slide, please. So we've already talked about several of these, but these were the policy questions that we came here with. I think we've sort of touched on the local independent business definition. We haven't really talked much about we said there was support for commercial tenants being the applicants, but looking at this list, I'm not sure if we should have, we want to go through.
Yeah.
I think we could, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ashley.
I was just going to say, I think we could go ahead and make sure that there's no other thoughts on some of these.
Yeah, I think it's good for us to address. Thank you for putting these in there. This is really helpful. So board, why don't we go through them? I guess, how would you define, I'm asking staff now, how would you define local independent business? Just that they're registered business license?
Yeah, so what we are thinking right now is local would be any business that is originated in Utah, and independent would be any non-franchised, non-corporate type business.
So as long as it's not a franchise and it's originated in Utah, what is it, one or the other or both? Because what if it's like R&R Barbecue that is originated in Utah but is now franchised? Would we? And I don't know if we should or should not be supporting that. You know what I mean? But there
right
are
now
local,
it's an and, I guess.
What's that?
It's an and, so local and independent.
Local and independent.
How it's proposed right now. Yeah.
But okay, we have, for instance, Hip and Humble is in 9th and 9th, but also in the airport. So would they all of a sudden be a franchise that is not applicable, even though it's very local business, right?
But isn't there a definition of franchise being owned by someone separate? So that's,
I think so,
yeah.
yeah.
You could have,
It could be a chain,
Yeah.
Okay,
but
so it can
not
be
like a franchise.
if
Oh,
there's
I
one
see.
owner, he owns 4 different restaurants. Those aren't 4 different franchises because he owns them all and he runs them all. A franchise is you buy into that and you.
When somebody gets a business license, do we know that? Or they just have to, when they're asking for the loan, somehow produce proof that that's their case?
Yeah, I think it would take diligence on our part to look into that and make sure that they meet that criteria. But yeah, I think the franchise would be like separate ownership.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, if it's like the same owner and has a business originated in Utah that has multiple locations in Utah, I think that we would support that.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
Committee member, yeah, I was gonna say, pretty sure there's a franchise disclosure document that
There is
legally
one,
has to be
okay.
submitted.
Board
Mr.
members,
Chair.
any other thoughts? I'm fine with that if staff feels like they can sort through that without us getting, I could also see like us making a determination that it wasn't local and getting in trouble for that, right? Like just make sure that there's something that we're not gonna, the business that gets denied because of it, there's a clear reason why they're denied so they can't come back and sue us for that.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Board Member Pui.
I wonder if we could include in this process the disproportionately impacted subcategory on this, as we did with the ARPA grants, the local business assistance, where we noted if a business was 100% woman-owned or BIPOC owned or whatnot. I think that to me is a big piece of the equation, and I would like to know about that.
Sorry, you were a little quiet.
Do you want me to repeat that whole thing? Can you hear me now?
Just the last section.
No, I just want to know. I just want to know if that could be added into the process.
Some of the same criteria that we did for the ARPA grants, you mean?
Yes.
Actually, that would be, I don't know if that's hard or easy, but it would be interesting to compare what we're proposing here with what worked and didn't work with the ARPA loans that we did for businesses. Because I think we learned a lot from those, so. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Board Member Pui?
Yes, I think it will be interesting for me to know if it's a business that is 100% BIPOC owned or women owned. You know, I think those are important categories that we care a lot about. So I would love to your point, I think we learned a lot through that ARPA process. So maybe we can pick some of the good pieces of that.
I think that's great. Okay, should we go to question 2?
Yes.
I gave you enough feedback on the first one.
Yes. I
Okay.
think so.
Question number 2 is related to expanding it to commercial tenants, not just building or landowners. I have already said I'm supportive of that. Is there any other
Same.
thought? Okay.
Okay.
Great, let's do that.
Head nods all around.
Head nods, yes. Number 3 is comfortable with how adaptive reuse is defined and the integration of adaptive reuse incentives in the program. So I made some thoughts on that. I think I'd like a little more time to think about how that works, or just a little more definition of what adaptive reuse qualifies as.
I agree with this. I think it's, knowing some individuals that own properties in the different CRA areas, a lot of them need new security systems or fire hydrant systems, for example. Would that qualify within this definition? It sounds like from your answer, yes, it could, but I'd love to have a little bit more. I don't know if I'm looking for metrics, but maybe some sort of description to make sure it doesn't exclude the apparatuses, that we're not just focusing on the integrity of the building, but also how it's supposed to be utilized in its systems that are required through planning, fire, and other potential types of construction needs. So I'd like to find a way if that's inclusive. If the recommendation from CRA staff is that this is inclusive enough, then maybe we just need to understand it a little bit better. I could see us debating and differentiating different types of applications. I'd like to streamline it a little bit better, so that way we don't have to have this discussion constantly with each application, but rather know that that's already inclusive of the definition and its use.
Yeah, I think, and I could be reading into what you're saying differently than what you mean, Board Member Lopez Chavez, but I think what you're saying is you want it to be more inclusive and more able to capture these things that really do exist in adaptive reuse projects.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to tour a lot of these buildings, and a lot of them, their facade or the structural integrity is well utilized, but perhaps it's missing other pieces for its full utilization and
Yeah.
permits for use, right?
I think what I'm saying is similar but slightly different, which is, yes, when there's a building that we want to have reused, like that we somehow have defined as a community that this is a building we want reused, then I want that flexibility to be increased. But I can also see a loophole where I could come apply for this and say it's adaptive reuse, and really it's a crappy building from 15 years ago that just happens to be on its third tenant, and really there's no reason why we want that building to be saved, because it's different when I'm thinking of the State Street corridor than when I'm thinking of Granary, as to the quality of buildings and the difficulty of a tenant moving back into them. So I think it's two sides. Yeah, Board Member Petro.
I think that begs the question, though, of the environmental impact of new builds versus preservation. There is a function of preservation for historicity, for character, for, completing the record, and we know that I love historic preservation, but there is a function of adaptive reuse for the purpose of for mitigating environmental impact.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think what I'm getting at is there are buildings that I think under the loose qualifications that I'm understanding them to be would qualify for a complete, not just a low interest loan, but a complete forgivable loan that actually financially don't need any incentive in order to have a tenant move into them.
So you mean if there's just interest in a building versus...
Is there economic hardship with reusing the building? Because there are buildings that are existing that the tenant just moved out and another tenant can move in any second and doesn't need new security systems or new plumbing or a fire riser.
Yeah.
That under that definition, wouldn't that be eligible?
I think so, yeah. I think I'm hearing I hope I'm understanding everyone's comments, and I think we just need to come back with, I think we need to add a little bit of definition to these terms, and we'll work on that and come back.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of there's buildings where there's tenants today that home a longtime pupuseria versus a building on State Street where the owner's just allowed dilapidation, right? And are waiting for the city to come up with an apparatus to overly subsidize it. So I hear you.
And to be clear,
I
there are
don't know if
buildings
we'll
on
find
State
the
Street that I
perfect
think
formula also.
I would want this to apply to, but there are others that's it's going to be really easy to move in another tenant there.
Yeah.
And we don't need to pay for that.
I don't know if we'll find a perfect formula, but I think it's interesting to think about and consider in these different CRA spaces, or I think of how many empty warehouses that we work with planning to try to adapt, and the reality is we need to consider this mechanism. Yeah. I'd love to utilize it. I mean, I certainly am supportive of it. I think just getting back a definition like you mentioned. Thanks for your hard work. Yeah.
On that last policy question, so it's first come, first serve versus a NOFA type of a situation. My thought is that start with first come, first serve and see how popular the program is. When you're a small business opening a thing, you don't do it on an annual calendar cycle. It just is when you're ready to open the business. I don't know that doing it once a year or even twice a year would fit into the timing of when small businesses are ready to launch.
Yeah, same thing. So I agree with you.
And I think so. My thought would be first come, first serve. But
yeah, so this was a recommendation we got from RAC, and they were sort of similarly saying the timeline of even if it's once a year, that's not frequent enough for small businesses. They had maybe suggested quarterly, or opening it up to be reviewed over a certain quarterly time period. And this was also just because of the concern that first come, first serve may make it really hard to compare projects against each other, or actually if you, the next slide shows our budget amounts, but trying to maximize the amount of funding that we do have. And if it's first come, first serve, project, we may spend more than we intend, and then a great project comes along. So just the the intervals would kind of maybe solve for that. But I do like the idea of kind
I
of
guess-
starting it out of the gate, just first come, first served.
If it were quarterly, I'd be open to that if CRA staff feels like that's easier to manage than first come, first serve, and there are other benefits, but definitely a year is too long.
Right. Yeah.
Half a year, probably still too long. Quarterly might work.
Yeah.
And I can see that being quarterly, like, hey, you have a cap every quarter on how much you have available. If you don't use it, you can just roll it into the next quarter, you just roll it into the next quarter. And you just keep rolling it if you need to, but have a cap for every quarter so you don't end up you spent all your money on the third quarter and you have a great project in the fourth.
Yeah.
So I think and also quarterly is almost at the first come, first serve, because that's a quick turn on some of these projects.
Pretty frequent, yeah.
I mean, if you're thinking about the timeline of setting an application and going through the process on how they get approved and weighted and awarded.
Yeah, that's what I think, because it's also like staff workload was a consideration with this, and I don't think it would have to be the process that we go through every time we do an NOFA. Like, we can just have the guidelines, the application all standardized, but just let the public know that 4 times a year we review them. Like, so it could be.
That feels like frequent enough to me.
Okay.
And we're a little over time, but this is important. Is there anything else you want feedback on before?
No, I think that's pretty much it. This last slide kind of shows our current budget standings for all the commercial assistance programs. So
I did have one more comment that I wanted to make, and I'm not necessarily opposed to what you're proposing, what CRA is proposing. I would like it as both council, and this is one of those things where I think we have different policies on the council side. We're approving as a council every loan that comes through the EDLF. So I would at least want to have the discussion of, if we're going to say certain dollar amount does not require board approval for this program, let's also have that for the EDLF as well, and decide if I want us to be consistent on both sides of that. So I'm not saying I want every loan to come to me, but I know that decision with the EDLF was made before. I'm pretty sure it was made before I was on the council, so I don't know the policy considerations as to why the council decided they wanted to review everything. So I would want us to revisit that question and make sure that we're at least somewhat consistent on both sides. Is that okay? Any other last comments on this board? All right, okay, let's move on to item C4, which is an informational update on the Gallivan Center. Danny Walls and Lucas Goodrich, so the CRA director and Gallivan Center director, are here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I want to start by introducing Lucas Goodrich. I don't know if all of you have met Lucas. He is the manager of the Gallivan Center, among other various experiences and skill sets that we won't get into, but he will be doing the bulk of the presentation. I just wanted to introduce it and set it up that the purpose of this presentation is to provide an overview of the Gallivan Center. We appreciate the opportunity to answer some of the questions that board members have presented to us, as well as the expression of interest for board members to learn more about Gallivan Center. Specifically, what is its place within the city? What is the agency's role working with the owners group in terms of the operations, as well as its history, background, programming, and funding. So if you look through the memo, you'll see that we provided quite a bit of detail on this. Lucas will go through the presentation and provide a little bit of a high-level overview, but obviously we're happy to stop at any point and answer any questions and give you more information towards the end if that works. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Danny. Next slide, please. All right, here you're looking at the entirety of Block 57, of which Gallivan sits right in the center of, between 200 South and 300 South, State Street and Main Street. We're just over 3.5 acres. So the Gallivan Center land, including the 3-story parking garage below it, is owned by the Community Reinvestment Agency, while the surrounding buildings, or some of the surrounding buildings, are owned by various private property owners. Slide, please. Some of these private property owners, along with the CRA, form an owners association, the Block 57 Owners Group, which collaborates to maintain and fund the upkeep of the plaza and its many amenities. The association's efforts and its guiding documents ensure that the surrounding property owners contribute to the space from which they benefit. For over 3 decades, the plaza has been sustained through revenue generated from on-site activities and assessments from the Owners Association. Next slide, please. The development of the Gallivan Center began in the early 1980s with the CRA's acquisition of properties on Block 57. The concept for the Gallivan Center was to provide an urban plaza in the heart of downtown that could serve as a community gathering place. The CRA constructed the underground parking structure as well as and plaza adjacent to the development of the One Utah Center office tower in the initial phase of the development. Officially finished in 1993, the initial design included several key features: a stage building, an ice rink, and various green spaces and passive enjoyment amenities. The development of the overall block and was guided by a master plan that not only created the plaza but provided the entire strategy for the development parcels as a corporate office building, hotel, retail, and preservation of the Brooks Arcade. As the surrounding properties were sold and developed, the plaza expanded and underwent modifications. The CRA retained ownership of the parking structure, the plaza, and the retail building on the north side of Gallivan Avenue. 2010, the ice rink was expanded and relocated to its current position, and in 2012, Gallivan Hall was constructed along 200 South, which includes large event restrooms, ice rink concessions, and private and meeting and rental space. Since these changes, the plaza has largely remained unchanged over the last decade. Next slide, please. A little deeper dive into the Block 57 Owners Group. It operates as a nonprofit, and it meets regularly, quarterly, currently, to conduct the business of managing the Gallivan Center. The owner of the One Utah Center does not participate in the association and are not subject to the conditions, covenants, and restrictions. And we'll dive into those here in a little bit. However, the Boyer Company, which owns the One Utah Center, does lease the parking garage from the agency and are involved in the shared parking agreement and management of that structure in conjunction with ourselves, the agency, the plaza, and the hotel. The CRA functions as both an owner and operator through 2 additional agreements outlined in the CC&Rs, the maintenance contract and the administrative contract. These contracts outline how Gallivan Center staff are responsible for maintaining the center and the common areas of Block 57, administering various contracts, and organizing programming throughout the year. This unique arrangement ensures that the Gallivan Center and its surroundings remain safe, secure, and accessible and welcoming to the public. Next slide, please. Our success is driven by our unique and diverse offerings, as well as our unique funding structure. Key funding is generated from these association assessments, additional funding from the CRA, and on-site revenue generation, giving the Gallivan Center the financial flexibility to grow our programming and set aside critical funds for capital repairs and replacements. We consistently maintain, beautify, and activate the Gallivan Center year-round, ensuring the space is well-kept and constantly engaging for the public. We generate appropriate revenue to fund our ongoing activities, including free, family-friendly, all-ages activities throughout the year. We continually thread the needle, if you will, in terms of balancing those income-generating activities with other no-ticket required activities or access, including daily passive enjoyment. Next slide, please. The funding and operational structure of the Gallivan Center is designed to ensure its continued vitality and success. While the plaza is maintained and operated as a public open space, the plaza does not draw any funds from Salt Lake City's general fund. The development parcels were sold subject to conditions, covenants, and restrictions, as I mentioned, that govern initial development on the block. This agreement includes design standards, signage requirements, creation of this shared parking agreement, and identification of all common areas. The CC&Rs also establish the creation of an owners association, along with the assessment of fees for the ongoing maintenance and programming of the plaza. These association fees are evaluated and updated annually and play a key role in maintaining the Gallivan Center and the broader Block 57 area. Additional funding via the CRA in the amount of $250,000 for enhanced programming costs was originally earmarked for excellence in the community, many of you who I've seen at those concerts. We have been repositioning those funds of late and hope to expand those programming options by using those funds and partnering with a broader group of programming organizations. So while we'll reduce our excellence in the community programming, this shift will allow for a more diverse programming partners across the valley, enhancing what we offer on a daily basis. Next slide, please.
Lucas, could I ask a question?
Please.
The previous slide. Do you have any just general order of magnitude of how much the association dues, how big are the association dues compared to revenue generated on site, and how big are those two things combined compared to, I know it's not coming out of the city's general fund, but there is money coming out of CRA tax increment, correct? Or do I understand that wrong? Like, yeah, for staffing or whatever. Is tax increment paying for like a small percentage or most of the overall, and then of the two things that are the association dues and the revenue generated, what's the breakup there?
Great questions, not necessarily easy
too.
answers of numbers we have off the top of our head. I will tell you right now that the agency is not necessarily directly aligning the revenue we receive from the parking garage, the retail, and the Gallivan to completely offset our expenses, but our ongoing goal is to keep those in alignment so that ultimately at some point when tax increment isn't there to support Gallivan Center, that it is provided for with that revenue. So we realize the revenue right now in our separate program income fund, we do use tax increment to cover our Gallivan assessment fees, but the idea is the structure would at some point align those to where it funds itself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can, that's great, thanks. You can continue.
Great. Next slide, please. All right. The Gallivan Center staff is a crucial structure to make sure that the ongoing operation and management of the venue for this specialized urban space. The CRA provides strategic oversight as well as capital support, while the Gallivan staff manage our day-to-day activities. All of the Gallivan staff are city employees, and their roles are 100% dedicated exclusively to the maintenance, programming, operations, and rental and event coordination of the plaza. We are currently facing 2 staff vacancies that are affecting some of our abilities to operate at full capacity, but we're working with human resources and our other city partners to get some of those positions and other policies updated so that we can get those positions posted publicly. Next slide, please. Just a quick overview of our programming activation. As many of you know or have experienced personally, Gallivan Center is a dynamic hub for both passive enjoyment and active programming all year long. Several of our events feature live music, cultural festivals, community gatherings that we feel cater to many tastes and interests. On average, the Gallivan Center is activated through some sort of programming for more than 250 days each year. So in addition to the beautiful grounds that are available to the public daily, we also produce or partner to produce more than 50 annual events that are free and open to the public. Next slide, please. This is a very brief and very abbreviated short list of some of our featured events, just that features the breadth and depth and varied events that we host, produce, or partner to produce with. Next slide, please. Rentals. So coming back again to some of our critical funding, the Gallivan Center facilitates nearly 100 private rentals each year, and it's an important part of our multi-pronged funding structure. So everything from small ULI gatherings, community gatherings, all the way up to full plaza buyouts. We have a ton of versatile spaces that meet a wide range of programming and activity needs. All of our indoor and outdoor spaces can be subdivided, divided, or combined all together. And last slide, please. All right, many of you have asked about the assessments and recommendations study that we have been undergoing. So the CRA has partnered with GSBS Architects, Civitas, and Phil Merrick through a public RFP process, and those were chosen, or excuse me, GSBS architects and their sub-consultants were chosen to lead the project to assess and develop recommendations for the future of the Gallivan Center. We're currently working with their consultants to finalize the assessments and recommendations study. The focus includes, but is not limited to, wayfinding enhancements, maintenance and capital projects planning, and future programming. The purpose of this study was to provide a roadmap, if you will, for how the Gallivan Center can best meet the evolving needs of the community over the immediate future and the long-term future, as well as further position the plaza as a central cultural hub for the city. Our staff, along with CRA staff, anticipates bringing the results of the study to this body in a future meeting. And final slide, please. Now this is the time where we hand it over to you all for additional questions or comments. Thank you.
Board Member Lopez Chavez.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Lucas. Is there a way to stratify and better help me understand the type of events and the revenue that's being created from those private events? It's my understanding from hearing from different constituents or organizations that rent the facility that they believe the dues are high. I hear that often, as well as maybe they feel limited on what they can or can't do. I myself have attended many Mexican baptisms, quinceañeras there, so very happy to hear that different communities are taking advantage of it. So just wanted to understand, what are our rates today? What does that projected rate and forecasting look like? How can we keep this space accessible? My second question was, you defined it as an urban plaza. Can you help me understand what an urban plaza is? Because Gallivan has many different uses, and I'd like to better understand how it connects with some of our capital projects that we are recently and have some consistent funding or impending funding needs to recognize.
Certainly. So to speak to your first question, obviously that's always on our mind in terms of keeping the plaza accessible. So we have a series of tiered funding. We do offer nonprofit pricing, as well as specialized pricing for our city partners or municipal partners. And we also recognize that there needs to be a balance of creating that revenue generation as well as keeping the plaza accessible. So we're constantly looking at those financial figures. As far as rates, we are consistently looking at other venues. And also through the study, we did ask the consultants to provide a robust package of examples from other cities, including their organizational structure, how they are funded. I'm thinking back to also our friends at Mill Creek Commons. You know, they asked us lots of questions over the last couple of years, and we recognize that they have a very different structure than we do, but we're always looking to partners to understand, you know, what the right fees are. Something we are embarking on right now, it's just in its infancy, is we're looking at some what we're calling micro rentals, if you will. We've had a lot of feedback where people do not want to rent the plaza for a half a day, a full day, multi-day rental, or you know, and we're looking at smaller increments of time to better suit the needs of the public that maybe they do need it only for 4 hours, 2 hours, et cetera. So did that answer your first questions about income balancing? Okay. And then the second question, remind me again, please.
Was how you are defining the urban plaza and its needs.
Admittedly, I could define that better. I think it's a mixture of what's in some of the city code. I was recently reviewing earlier today some of the, excuse me, Danny, what are the documents we're reviewing with lawyers with some First Amendment free speech areas and how plaza and is defined in code. So, and also I'm probably repeating some words from our urban planners and whatnot. So I'd be happy to come back with some further detail on how we define what an urban plaza is. Danny, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would first turn on my microphone. I would add that the idea of the urban plaza is really finding that balance. It's not a traditional greenscape park where you're going to, you know, be able to host a soccer game. It doesn't necessarily have some of the traditional amenities that you would find in a park, but it's meant to be more of a downtown active type area that balances between being passive and offering those amenities to your typical downtown visitor or worker or resident, but then at the same time being able to convert to have activation and or be available for rentals. And I think that was the original intent with Gallivan, was to kind of not try to be a city park, but be open space that's available in the middle of downtown, and at the same time provide an opportunity for that programming that would bring people downtown.
Okay, I think you had a follow-up question, and then Councilmember Petro after.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Or if Victoria wants to go, board member Petro would like to go before me.
Thank you.
Happy to go.
Okay, so as a general rule, big fan of Gallivan, have already spent more money than is rational taking my kids ice skating there this season.
Thank you.
However, I worry that we have boxed ourselves in with a governance structure that is not responsive to the city we want to become, and I'm hoping I'm wrong about that. So what I'm seeing is the pressure for our city at this point is to become an 18-hour city, at least. That was the auspices under which the SEG deal was initiated, the MLB presence, the move towards the Olympics. This is one of the few spaces where we're not having to compete with the private sector to do the things that we find important. Yet it feels like when we have something that gains momentum and reflects those city priorities, the governance structure kicks in, and all of a sudden this doesn't become a possibility. We watched Craft Lake City leave, we watched the Urban Arts Festival, I believe, leave, and recently we're facing stress over Twilight and whether or not Twilight can be sustained there. So my concern is, while quinceañeras are important, and like I even want the Rose Park Golf Course, clubhouse updated so we have more spaces that make these kinds of festivities approachable. The larger city goal that is reached, those things are subsidiary things to help cash flow and make the city priorities come to life through a city investment. I'm perennially concerned and frustrated by the limitations of Gallivan Center. Can we go a little deeper into that? I'm not meaning for this to be accusatory, but it really does feel like our own city assets are being left out of this city momentum. And that's the most frustrating thing in the world, that we invested city dollars, we have city priorities, city activities, and we can't have them on our city property. Yeah. Could you help me with that?
Sure, would love to. I think the first thing I'd say with regard to Twilight, which is kind of indicative of where we ended up with those other two events, is number one, it's what is a safe capacity level to have events at Gallivan, just for the safety of the participants and all those involved, as well as what is the balance with the limitations just that Gallivan is. And we love having Twilight. We want to continue to partner with Twilight, but we also recognize that Twilight, as of recent years, is a very popular event and has produced some very significant crowds on Gallivan that probably exceed our ability to provide safety to those participants, as well as accessibility to those who participate. So I think that's where we're at with Twilight. I think we're having good conversations where we can land in a good place with what is reasonable to expect with Gallivan and what is a successful model for Twilight. With regard to Craft Lake City, that is the same place we got with them. We loved Craft Lake City. We were happy to be a partner with them as that event grew, and eventually it grew to where it got too big for Gallivan, both in terms of what they were wanting to do as far as capacity rentals and their vendors, as well as what Gallivan just reasonably could handle. Gallivan, as we said, was designed to be more of a plaza, not necessarily a massive event venue. That is not what it was designed for. And the reason for that is because we wanted that mix of uses. We wanted the quiet area by the story wall, we wanted the ice rink, we wanted a rental space, and we wanted the ability to have a concert. But we have realized crowds at Twilight that have exceeded what you would have at Red Butte or Granary Live. And those are concert event rentals, which Gallivan is not, with our different levels and our limitations of different uses. So we love hosting events. Lucas has been great at wanting to start looking at how Gallivan can have that evolution of events, where we go back to where we are fostering some of these events, we're growing them, and then eventually, if they get so successful, they may have to go to a larger venue. And that's great. That means we've produced a great event. And then there are some that we want to make sure are right-sized for Gallivan and can be safe for the participants, can have accessibility, and can still find that balance of being economically viable. And I think that's exactly where we're trying to get with Twilight, and recognizing that we don't necessarily want them to go somewhere, but there is probably a right size and fit for that type of concert at Gallivan. So
just one follow-up. What is reasonable capacity, and does that capacity lend itself to the economically approachable events that we want, or is the cost of executing an event there so high that it is no longer, are we essentially running an ice skating rink and a wedding venue?
yeah, no, and we don't want to do that. We want to have events like Twilight. So the capacity is oftentimes dependent on what the use is. If you have a use that takes up all of Gallivan, that could have a different capacity than if you're going to have a concert where the bulk of the people are going to want to be squeezing as much as they can in front of the stage. So the capacity does vary. For Twilight, we're looking at a capacity of about 5,600, because that's what we're seeing as a good capacity, both for use of the restrooms, accessibility, being able to maintain it and manage it. Whereas we've had Twilight concerts in the range of 7 up to almost 8,000 people. So that gets to where it's more difficult to even get in and service the restroom, or if we had to go in and do a medical call. To answer your question, we do think there is a balance there between what is economically viable, and that comes down to what is the type of event. Is it a paid event where the ticketing and the price of the event can help offset? Is it a matter of what we as Gallivan staff can partner in terms of what we can offer as far as the venue cost, the maintenance level we can provide, and what is needed to just continue to support the venue? And then that comes down to, if there's a gap in that, what is our level as an agency or Gallivan to where we can fill that gap with a subsidy? And that gets to the point of where you as a board, and we come to you every year, we can speak to what level are we subsidizing Gallivan and the events we have versus what level can we truly balance that with what are rentals or ice skating and things that turn a profit. So yes, we think there's a balance there. We think that's both event by event, as well as what we look like as an annual strategy for our programming. And that's what we're looking to hone in.
Lopez Chavez.
Yeah, thanks. And I agree with my committee member, my fellow committee member. There's a few thoughts in my head. One of them is how downtown residents and the growth of those residents require different amenities for their young families. Dinwiddie Park is the closest accessible park to Main Street. Dinwiddie Park is leased, thus Gallivan Center, being the urban plaza that it is, should have some flexibility, and I see need for that. The second piece in regards to connecting programming or existing or future programming that we'll discuss, I think about our conversation with Open Streets in proximity to Main Street, or the Main Street Promenade in its future iterations, how the CRA could work as a partner to better facilitate leasing these different assets that we own as a CRA in conglomeration with the utilization of the promenade. I just think there's so many events that exist today that could be scaled economically to create more impact for the downtown without having to rely on SCG or the Capital Revitalization City Area Plan or Green Loop, right? We're talking about, we have an urban plaza closest in proximity to a main street that is not activated today. And so I'd love for this commission, for my colleagues and I, to really consider what that looks like. And I'd love for you all to come back with an agreement or a facilitated approach where organizations can come and take advantage of our beautiful Main Street in downtown.
So both Lopez Chavez and Petro's comments relate to something that that's running through my head about this, and was when we had the previous, I think, small group meeting about Gallivan, which is, as we're looking at potentially investing in more spaces that could function similar to Gallivan. Rio Grande Festival Street Ballpark sounds like may have an even larger venue, event venue within there, and then Main Street Plaza, Green Loop, things like that. I want us to think really carefully about how, I understand that the governance structure of Gallivan Center also includes surrounding businesses. I get the reason why that would be beneficial, but I think it would be a shame if we started to invest in all these and we had like a director of the Gallivan Center and a director of the venue at the ballpark and all these different organizations, each with their own sort of culture and system, that I, as a resident or someone that's wanting to throw an event, have to go navigate like 5 different departments, all to have to figure out which asset that ultimately is all the city or the CRA can help, which one's a good fit for me. So I don't know exactly what that looks like, but it'd be nice if there was coordination amongst all of those spaces that we are looking at potentially bringing online, and that we're correcting things or fixing things or adjusting things within the Gallivan Center Plaza so that it could become the structure for those things, or replacing, I don't know exactly what, but I just don't want like it to be each of these spaces to be their own island that I have to learn how to navigate and figure out which one is right for me.
Something we do see, Director Mono, is that we do get a lot of inquiries where people, prospective event planners or event holders, they do need a lot of assistance and they need that guidance. So I think there are some tools that the city has, Open Counter and our partners in other departments that can help with that. But certainly some of our outward-facing documents, websites, social media can help with those in the future.
Thanks. Any more comments on this item?
I just wanted, again, I think I'm really enthused by this conversation, particularly because Main Street is an obstacle that this city has to overcome. Our Main Street today is not fully activated and functioning in a capacity where I believe we can get to. We've made decisions in the past year since I've joined the council that will help ignite and help build progress and continuity into an ecosystem that already exists. So I just want to emphasize the residents' need, and then the need for our city to build that continuity and that spectrum of activation on Main Street and in proximity to. I know this is a conversation about Gallivan today, but I see it coherently as a necessary dialogue of all of our Main Street. And our conversations often delineate to the rest of our city. We still have a Main Street and a core of downtown that needs dire activation. I recognize the other areas of the CRA are also in dire need. I think of North Temple, but North Temple doesn't have, it doesn't home Main Street, right? Unfortunately, it has its own necessity, especially when we activate our sports, entertainment, cultural core, or cultural convention center core. So I just want to emphasize that again. I really want us to work with the CRA and with Danny as our champion on this to really help find this plan and methodology, and also better define Gallivan. It sounds like it's got a very loose term, and I'd like to rescope that and rework it in a way that infuses our reinvestments, prioritizing the families that are moving into proximity. We are going to be discussing, as a legislative body, approvals for so many more condos and apartment buildings that are being built up all around us. And it is dire for us to also reinvest the needed utilities and amenities for those families.
All right, Board Member Pui let's go to Board Member Pui, and then we probably should wrap up soon.
Thank you. Very quickly, certainly the reason I remember this conversation started is because some of us, maybe even a majority of us, had concerns about Gallivan. And we have heard, I personally heard from several members of the community that told me about negative interactions with the Gallivan and experiences that wouldn't reflect the values of the city, and through this process we're learning about the structure and who gets to decide what and where the money goes, and how all of this structure that predates this board came about. But this obviously makes me wonder a step forward about what authority does the board to rescope the authority on this, and what is the process if we do have some authority to rescope how decisions are made. And I connect this to the Rio Grande conversation and how a different entity was deciding, was in paper going to decide things for the board. And, this is when we raised those flags about this issue. So I guess my question is more maybe to board staff or council staff about this agreement and how this agreement can be reworked, or can it be?
Board Member Petro.
Board Member Puyo took most of the words out of my mouth. This is why we have, was it a legislative intent, or we raised earlier that we would like a governance policy. Lucas, you know that I'm a fan of yours from way back. I know your experience, and I know you are doing the best. But we've been handed a governance structure and an entity that isn't responsive to modern pressures. That may always happen because of the size of the plaza we planned, right? But when we put other unnecessary limitations on us, I think that's frustrating. So as we're looking forward to these other projects, I think the best thing we can do is maximize the potential here, mitigate things. And Lucas, you've done a lovely job. Being there really is an energetic experience. I'm not kidding when I said my family and I have spent a large amount of time there over this holiday season. But moving forward, the best thing we can do now is to learn from this. And we can't bind future councils. We should not bind future developments. What if, God forbid, we want to move to a 24-hour city? We need to have the flexibility to do that, and our city assets should be reinforcing city priorities without undue limitation. So I'm Board Member Pui and Board Member Lopez Chavez, I'm in complete alignment with them.
Great.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to speak to that. I think what would be helpful for us as agency staff and Gallivan staff is we would love to hear from you as a board of where you feel we're missing the mark or what we can do better. I think Lucas has been great at wanting to kind of obviously position the agency in a way that has that balance. I think we're open to that input and suggestions of when you say that we've had a failure through the government structure. I'd love to hear what that failure is determined to be and how we can address it, because I don't think the governance structure is the limiting factor. I think you as a board, through your adoption of the budget and your direction to us as staff, have the ability to tell us what you'd like to see Gallivan be more of. And our job as staff is to tell you that within the confines of that governance structure and the fees that we receive, as well as the subsidy that the agency pays, how we can make that happen. And that is a balance between what we can do through our involvement in the maintenance and the programming contract right now, which gives us a tremendous amount of flexibility, as well as what are the goals and priorities of you as a board. And then we can determine if that requires additional subsidy. We can have conversations of how to balance that with revenue generating events, as well as where we can look at other opportunities for revenue in terms of sponsorships or naming rights or anything else. So we're more than happy to have those conversations in small groups, or if you want to identify a few of you that would like to get in those details. I say this because I think we can make that happen. And if nothing else, we can come up with a strategy and inform of what that programming is. Because I guarantee if someone were to sit here and say we want to open a 3-acre urban park in the middle of downtown, and we want to activate it 250 days a year, and we don't want a penny of the city's general fund, all of you would jump on that opportunity. And that's what Gallivan has been, is a lot of the funding comes from those owners' assessments. The rest of the funding comes from the agency and or revenue generated by Gallivan Center. And it's been incredibly successful. While at the same time we recognize that there are different demands of our space, there are a tremendous amount of opportunities for other improvements and infrastructure investments that the city wants to make. And we'd love to position Gallivan to do that. That's the whole reason we asked for the money for the plan, because we want to look at what the next 20 to 30 years of Gallivan could be. So we are welcome and open to have any of those conversations.
I just wanted to correct for the record. Sorry, I can't help it. Gallivan staff was previous to, I think, 5 or 10 years ago, part of the city general fund staff. So there were several decades where city general fund was staffing Gallivan. Also CRA funds or city funds, but that that's neither here nor there. Also, the city CRA put in, I think it was $6 or $7 million to do the last rebuild of Gallivan, and several of the planning efforts are also calling for CRA funds to fund that. So I don't think it's quite accurate to say that there's no city investment needed as part of this partnership, part of this governance structure. It's just, I think there are some growing pains that we've heard, and we've even heard from constituents. So just so you know, it's not just board members, it's the Twilight Concert Series that is experiencing their kind of, growing pains themselves. And I think the safety concerns are absolutely valid for you guys to weigh, but I think that is highlighting this tension that kind of needs some resolution. So
I appreciate that, but the general fund is not paid for staff. The Gallivan staff, even though at one point they were in public services, they were still funded through the Owners Association. There were some staff members that had dual roles and did provide city functions, but they were, as my understanding, have always primarily been funded through the owner's assessments and the agency contributions. So
happy to
that's
discuss
why,
that more offline, because I have a
to.
different understanding.
Okay. Regardless, the general fund is not currently contributing to Gallivan.
All right.
And that's where we're at.
Mr. Chair, very quickly, could I?
Yeah, real quickly, we probably need to leave time for council meeting.
I get. Thank you. I appreciate you letting me fit in this last. Regardless, about the successes of the Gallivan's management, I still have concerns about if it meets, our values, and I want to make sure that we are on the same page about those. And I don't think it does at the moment, to be sincere. So I'm looking forward to more conversations about this, and to ensure that there is a transparent process for the public. And when we have so many people telling us the same thing, something may be wrong. So I'm excited for more conversations about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Let's move on to the announcements from the executive directors. Anything from the mayor's table? All right. CRA staff report and announcements. Danny, do you have?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to first start by thanking you and previous Chairperson Pui for your time. Normally in our January meetings, we would thank you for your time serving as vice chair and chair. Hopefully you received the gifts we left for you.
Thank you.
We would normally present those in the meeting, but they had some perishable goods, so we wanted to try to get them to you sooner than later since our meeting got bumped back. But thank you for that, and we look forward to serving with you, Chairperson Lano and Vice Chairperson Dugan. So appreciate that. A couple quick updates. Number one, wanted to thank Director Pui for his involvement along with the mayor at the ribbon cutting for 144 South Apartments. This is a project that the agency provided $1.7 million in funding along with multiple partners to provide affordable 6-story energy efficient units, 110 units to be exact, that are earning at or below 60% of AMI. So this was a great event. Really appreciate your involvement, Director Pui, as well as calling out the fact that this was a building that meets not only our Energy Star sustainability, also has first floor retail, co-working space, and various other amenities. So thank you for that. Also wanted to give the board an update that we did close on the acquisition of a 1/4 acre piece of property at 937 West 200 South. This is just out of the Central City neighborhood in our State Street project area. Appreciate the support. This is the property, if you recall, that we were able to get at a pretty good price that we felt was a little bit below market rate. And this is a property that we're going to look at targeting for a for sale unit, family size housing unit. So now that we have closed on that, we're going to start doing that due diligence and look at how we can turn that into a really cool home ownership opportunity. And finally, it feels weird to say this at the end since we've already been talking about us as a community reinvestment agency, but wanted to provide the board with an update that is official. We appreciate it. I think I've counted no less than 7 times where us as staff have hesitated to say CRA instead of RDA, so that will continue to be an issue for all of us, especially for those, probably you too, Jen, that have been here for so long that it's going to be hard. But this is, I think the culmination has been several years of us as an agency to really try to reposition and align our focus on community level reinvestment. You've done that with our mission statement, our values. You talked about it today with our livability benchmarks. This was kind of what we wanted as that final piece, to reflect that. So new name, everything is starting to go into place. We'll continue to find areas we probably need to make those changes. So be patient or inform us when you see that. And other than that, we'll probably start rolling out some new stuff for you as well too. So thank you for your support in that endeavor. That's all I have, Mr. Chair, unless you have any questions.
Does this make our RDA swag collector items now?
Yeah.
Yes, they are. That's what we've been
It's
calling them.
vintage.
Is vintage.
All right.
They are vintage now.
All right, I'm gonna hold on to it,
Hold on to
preserve
them
it.
tightly because you can say you were there when. So
Yes,
Mr. Ch-
exactly. Thank you. I appreciate those updates. The next
Mr.
item is
Chair.
report of chair, vice chair. I'll just say I'm excited for the upcoming year. Thanks for the board for their trust in me and board member Dugan. Excited to work with board member Dugan again. I was his vice chair in the past, and so and excited to keep working with RDA. It's like my foot in the door at City Hall. So sorry, CRA, I did it. All right, and with that, no written briefings, no consent agenda, no closed session, right? So we are adjourned.
Mr. Council Chair, do you want to say